How you going, man?
Yeah, good, man.
We had a I'm always good. Thank you for asking. No one asks how I'm going.
Oh,
No, they do.
I care.
You do. We had a really good episode drop recently.
We did, man. Yeah, it was good.
We talked about the 1.2 million homes. Andrew Hursto.
I was excited. Andrew's first podcast.
That was really cool.
Mate, he's a titan in the industry, so it was great to get him on and have his first podcast. So thanks, Andrew, for joining.
First of many, I think, for him, with us and with others
he was
as well.
impressive.
I was impressed. Yeah.
Look, what I like with Andrew, it's you've got data and analytics, and then you've got like on the ground raw experience.
Man of the people experience.
Mate, he's a man of the people. He's got the on the ground experience. So I personally loved having him on, and it was great to have him next to Eliza, who's not so much on the ground, but the data side of things.
Numbers, data, what happened. Yeah, so very well researched and but two really different opinions, and I thought it showed during the episode. We got a lot of comments about this episode.
We did.
So I want to kind of read through some of the comments, react to some of them. Maybe we can pull back.
Is anyone calling you
parts of the
carbs yet
episode.
in there? Or?
Everyone, oh yeah, I get a few carbs. Is there any carbs in these comments? I'm not too sure. Quite a few comments, and there's probably a few different themes which we can go through. One of them was about the cranes. I thought, and we can probably snip to this page, but there was a comment from Andrew about there's no cranes in Western Sydney.
If you could get in a car and drive around Western Sydney, you could almost put your bottom dollar on it. It wouldn't be a crane that's actually building a residential tower. There's numerous reasons, one, economics, but I find it's more productivity, rising construction costs, and also, the high rates levies that sort of can't be absorbed in the western suburbs. So
it's true.
It's 100% true.
So do you want and a lot of that is to do with obviously the cost of construction.
Yep.
Some of the comments were, and we had a few comments like, "Hey, I'm on the GC and there are cranes everywhere."
Yep.
Like literally.
The Gold Coast is going gangbusters.
Well, on the Gold Coast recently, you get to the airport, you drive it into surface, and there are literally that one highway. There's just cranes up and down.
Gold Coast to me, with there's a crane index actually that's out there, but Gold Coast to me actually is what Western Sydney used to be 5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
In terms of the number of projects that are happening and building happening. I mean, in Parramatta, I can only think there's probably 2 or 3 projects that are under construction at the moment, and those projects may have 2 or 3 cranes on them itself.
Yeah.
I think the Powerhouse Museum's got 4 or 5 cranes there, but that's a government project. So there is not much happening out there. He's absolutely correct. Maybe
North Sydney on that crane index is high now too. So you've got another comment from Tamara West. There's plenty of cranes in Crow's Nest, North Sydney at the moment, and there's you can probably throw a net over 10 projects at the moment.
That's correct. There's about 8 or 9 projects that are happening there at the moment. But the reason why that's happening is because out at Western Sydney, the cost to actually construct apartment. Now, it's not the same cost, but it's a very similar cost. Concrete in Western Sydney is the same price or similar price to concrete in Crow's Nest, or to install concrete and steel. So I think these are the fundamental factors that are playing out in the market, where the cost to deliver a property in those regional areas or the Western Sydney areas is very difficult. But that's where the affordability band is, right? So I'm going to say I still consider a property to be affordable if it's under $1 million, right? To most people. So from that $500 to $1 million range is that affordable bracket. If we can't deliver properties in that bracket, which at the moment we can't, under $1 million is very difficult for developers to deliver purely from a cost perspective, then we're never going to get projects that are up and running in that particular. I can't see them happening in the next couple of years.
And of course, that's the biggest point, right? So it costs basically the same to build in Merrylands or in St Leonards, but you can charge more for a home in St Leonards than you can in Merrylands. So that's where
it's not from a lack of the developers don't want to build in those areas. I think there's plenty of sites that are out there that have either approved or unapproved DAs out there. So they want to actually build, they just can't.
One final comment on the cranes. Online Natural said plenty of cranes on Parramatta Road. Now, yes, there are starting to be a few. You've got a few big sites on Parramatta Road that are about to happen from Burwood to the city.
Yep.
But I would say when we're talking west, we're not talking inner west anymore. So Parramatta Road starts at Strathfield Concord. I think that it actually starts before that.
Starts at like
Albany-ish, right? But I think they're talking about, that's where the cranes are, right? The cranes are Concord to the city.
I see it from like Concord, sort of Burwood area.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always things happening in Burwood. There's lots happening
in Burwood.
But from Burwood out in Sydney itself. So from Burwood all the way out to the city.
So where the affordability becomes tricky is further west, the new west.
The way I see it, so anything underneath that 1.2 million, 1 million to 1.2 million price point is very difficult right now to deliver.
There was a really interesting comment that, and it was almost, I wouldn't say it was a debate, but it almost got heated with Andrew and Eliza. And Eliza made a comment about how the RBA has done the numbers And based on what they've unraveled, if property prices dropped 30%, people would be okay with it. But Andrew said, what do you mean? People won't be okay with that.
But the RBA has done modelling to suggest that even if home values fell 30% overnight, 90% of households would still have positive equity. So
it's a big call. Everyone measures their position of what their home's worth, but to drop 30% across the board.
I mean, there's a
just as an example, even if you brought home values down 5 or 10%, something that enabled the gap between income and values to close even a little. I think their point was that Australia's housing market is incredibly financially stable from that perspective, and that even a loss in home value would still have most households in a positive equity position. I think what the RBA was saying, though, with that analysis is that our system is so strong that it could sustain that kind of price fall.
So they're using an extreme case to just showcase what you're saying.
Well, when you look at the GFC, I mean, going back to the GFC, what was the percentage that
8% peak to trough nationally.
And imagine at 30, it was a disaster. At 8, at 30, I wouldn't want to be there. I think it would be a disaster.
And I think it was very interesting. We had a lot of comments about this as well. There was one comment from Aussie Ezekiel saying that pretty sure Japan, Argentina, Iceland all had housing falls of 30%. So this is something that has happened, or probably has happened around the world. Harder for it to happen in Australia, but the comment on, hey, we'd be okay with 30% versus, hey, actually, would we be okay with 30%? It was a very interesting one.
Very interesting comment. I think, to be clear, Eliza was not saying that it's okay to drop 30%. She's looking at the RBA analysis. That's a really important. It's not Eliza's thought. It's talking about the RBA analysis. But like even that comment talking about Japan, I mean, since the 80s, there's been a very fundamental issue in Japan, which is population decline, which has led to property prices and where it is today. There's been negative growth in Japan for many, many years or decades even, which has led to property. So I think, can that happen in Australia? Look, anything can happen, right? I mean, we shouldn't say 30% drop can't happen. Anything can happen if the right circumstances present itself. Will it happen is another story. I can't see it happening from a 30% drop. And I think with the RBA modelling is looking very narrow to say, okay, if there's a 30% drop, what that analysis was saying was if there was a 30% drop, that the people that currently own property, so a lot of the people don't have mortgages or they have sufficient equity, they would still have an equity position and be fine. But I think that's a very narrow view to look at if property prices fall 30%, what happens? I think there would be huge impacts in the Australian market generally, not only for the banking sector, but for superannuation funds where people rely on, for people that do own property, for renters. That actually has an implication for renters if all of a sudden investors are selling their stock. Now, someone might say, well, that renter can then go buy a property. But I can guarantee you, if there's headlines out there that say property prices falling 30%, there'll be many renters out there that say, you know what, that might fall 50%. I'm not going to buy anymore. That's just the nature of, that's the human
People
nature,
don't know
right?
where the end is.
They don't know. And it's like the old catching a falling knife. When a knife is falling, you don't try and catch it. So that's where I think if property prices were to fall 30%, naturally people would think, well, it's going to fall 40 or 50% and they wouldn't buy. So people would still, I don't think that would be what renters are actually after.
Look, I do get both sides of what was happening in that argument, because on paper, if I've got a lot of equity, if I'm 80% LMO, if I've got 80% equity in my property and it drops by 30%, of course, on paper, I will be okay. But will I be happy about it? I think where the debate sort of spurred on, because would I be happy about it? No. Will I feel richer? No. What implications does that have on the market? What implications does that have, like you said, about the banks, about renters, etc.?
I just think it has such a wealth effect in the country. Yeah. Like if it is 2/3 that own property, there is that 1/3 that is trying to break in, and I mean, our whole business is based around trying to get them in. I think there's a massive wealth effect that impacts. If you are a property owner and your property is worth $1 million and it suddenly drops 30%, it's worth 700. There's a massive wealth effect that comes with that, where you think you don't have as much buying power, you think you can't spend as much. So then all of a sudden you're not making those consumer decisions. You're not going on that holiday. You're not going to that cafe on a weekend. You're not going to those dinners, and then that affects employment. So the young people that are employed in those services, retail, hospitality, they then get affected. And so then you'll start to see shutdown of businesses if the wealth effect isn't there. So I think it's dangerous.
I agree. Push all that aside. Let's say you're talking to producer Peach, and he wants to buy his first home, and he's like, fuck, it's expensive. If you said, hey, Peach, look, in 6 months, it's going to be 30% less, he'd be pretty happy about that, I reckon.
But if you can guarantee that it's only 30% that's going to go back up, then, but I think naturally when things are coming down, then there's that whole herd mentality of everyone will stop buying.
Yeah. My absolute favorite messages or comments from this episode came around the tradie conversation. Yeah. I think there's a lot to unpack here. We had a comment saying 100% agree regarding the tradie shortage and the lack of young Australians wanting to become tradies. It's a shame. Considering the current tradie situation, which is a shocker out there, for a young entrepreneur to be as successful as a tradie business owner, the formula is simple. And this is very interesting. Answer the phone, be honest, do what you say you're going to do, boom, the tradie business owner is a millionaire. There were comments to this comment, right? So someone said, no tradie business owners are millionaires, moron. My dad owned a civil construction company, net profit, $500,000. Was at most upper class, not millionaire. B, builder owner doesn't net that profit in 2025. Then someone else said to that, I think you missed the entire part of the message that actually mattered, bud. So I love the banter that's going on. There is money to be made for tradies if they're doing their job well, all right? I grew up in an area, Western Sydney boy, and, areas that were probably middle class, low to middle class, but you started seeing McMansions popping up, beautiful houses, big blocks. And who was building these houses? Who was living in these houses? Electricians, plumbers. It was the tradies that were good at what they did, that do their job well. There is money there to be made.
Look, I think it is tough out there for tradies. And I think the margins have reduced. Absolutely. They've shrunk in the last few years. And then there's the whole situation of you do the job and you don't get paid. But there's also the situation where a lot of people just, they realize that you can get a call it a cushier job in an office, not having to break your body. Like my dad was a plumber for the better part of 45, 50 years, and it broke his body. Like his shoulders are completely stuffed. His knees are stuffed, like particularly on the plumber, like you're always in weird locations. It took a massive toll on his body. And so there's that outcome of it. And I don't see a lot of people wanting to leave school. I don't think people are still leaving school at the age of 16 to break out and do a trade. I think that's though where the opportunity lies. If everyone is going to one situation, going to university and getting into the workforce at 22 after doing their university degree, there's a huge advantage for someone that is prepared to drop out at 16, 17 out of school, go into the workforce, become a carpenter, become an electrician, plumber, like do those core trades. And then it could be the simple things like answering the phone and responding to appointments. That's in any job.
That's
right?
every business.
That's every business. That's every job. If you're not going to do that, then don't become a business owner. So I think there's that element to it, but it is hard work. And I think, do people want to be outdoors all the time in 40-degree heats, particularly in Australia, or do they want to, go into the indoor sort of work? There was one really interesting comment that was touching on the tradie part about miners.
I was going to read this one
let's
next,
read that comment,
because I think this has really a big play as well. So Jeffrey Day said, in my mining team of 15, we have 5 carpenters, 2 plumbers, 2 electricians and 2 boilies who currently will not go back to their trades as they are very well paid in mining. Rosters are great and still have the opportunity of learning another trade or skill while in mining, despite automation is a big thing, blah, 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 blah. He's saying that a lot of tradies will take the mining money, then when the boom ends, go back to their trades. So you're already saying that like there's less people trying to be tradies. Well, of those, they're taking other opportunities as well.
Well, I think that's a huge point. Yeah. If there's a huge higher paying job in the mines where they can go and work and still learn their trade, because ultimately they are learning their trade.
Yeah.
And if things stuff up in the mine, there's a downturn, they can always come back to whatever location they're at and still fall back on their trade, which is a really exciting point.
Yeah.
But I think if they're getting paid really well to go to the mines, they've got consistency of income, which is a huge problem for a lot of tradies and self-employed people, consistency of income. Then if you do get that consistency of income, making sure you actually get paid is another huge problem if you end up in a dispute. And then it's actually finding the work and doing that whole legwork, that whole process. If you can do that, even if it's earning a little bit less, but in a mine, really stable job, I think that's very attractive for a lot of people.
We're probably seeing it in other areas as well. So Western Sydney Airport, probably taking a lot of tradies away.
Yes.
A lot of roads infrastructure that's happening, probably taking a lot of tradies.
All that government infrastructure.
Yeah, all of that stuff. So there might be a shortage, but it's even shorter. to a
But you know
degree.
what?
So
I want to hear from more tradies.
I do too.
I want
Yeah.
to know what they're thinking here. Like, why aren't 16-year-olds dropping out and doing a trade? Is there something wrong with how we treat apprentices? There's a whole issue of how we treat apprentices. Is there a lack of training? Is there an issue on how we train people? Is it because they're not getting paid? Is it they're not getting the opportunities? I actually want to hear more from tradies and really understand this discussion. Not only from tradies, even from politicians. Like, what are you doing to help get more trades to the country? Whether that's upskilling our local workforce, or bringing skilled immigrants in to the country. Like, what are we doing here?
I foresee a tradie series here. I like this, where you're heading. If anyone is there,
What do you think what's a tradie series? What do you think that looks like?
I think we'd speak to tradies. I think if anyone is a tradie and wants to speak on it, drop a DM, let us know, because let's put something together, because I had a lot of fun talking about this episode. And thank you. If you haven't watched it, if you're jumping in at this point, go back and watch the episode, because it's a cracker. But anyone that has watched it, that left comments, thank you so much, because it gives us an opportunity to hear your thoughts and talk more about it and break it down even further. So the more you guys get involved in the comments, the more we can have conversations like this. And we'll have one pretty soon, I'm sure, Chris. So thanks, mate.
Thanks, Carbs.